So here's a story about when I was looking for this job on Craigslist. I got a reply from a Craigslist ad that said, looking for someone to hand out flyers. For a promotional event that was happening on Kings Highway. So I answered the ad, and they got back to me. They said, come in tomorrow, and we'll tell you everything that's going on. So I go in, and I talk to the guy, and it was actually a liquidation event, an auction. There was a electronics store that was going out of business. So they sold, what happens when it goes out of business is that they liquidate their assets, which means they auction off all the hardware that they had originally. So my job was to stand out in the corner and hand out flyers for this. So I did that for a day, did it, blah, blah, blah. Handed out to people, people walked by, learned about the auction. At the end of the day, I went back and handed him all the rest of the flyers, and he paid me money. He was like, okay, tomorrow, if you still want a job, I have another job for you. And I was like, okay, cool, I'll totally use another job, And he was like, all right, I'll tell you tomorrow what it is, So I'm like, all right, fine, I'll do it. So I get up the next morning, and I go in to this place, and they're having the big auction that day, and what? And he's like, the guy's like, okay, here's your job. And there's a couple other people who had also responded to a different Craigslist ad than I had responded to. And I didn't know what that one said, but he was telling us all the job. And he's like, this is your job. We need you, and he was this big Israeli guy. He was like, we need you to pretend you're part of the auction. He's like, you watch me, each one will have a different sign. So when I go like this, you raise the price by raising your hand. And my sign was this. So there's 4 other different people, and the whole deal was that he was gonna, if someone thought that they were bidding too low, that they'd raise the price. And it was a whole big store full of washing machines, computers, and videotapes, and video cassettes, DVDs, and all types of electronics. So he gave me the signal. He was like, this is it. This is your signal. Every time I do this, he'd be like, I'd be going like this. Once, twice, 3 times. And if he did that, I'd have to raise my hand and be raising the price. So we all got briefed on what we're supposed to do. And then the guy who was running the auction, he was owning the store, and he was running the whole business, but there's someone else who was the auctioneer who came in. He was the guy who would be actually selling. He'd get up on the mic and be like, going once, going twice. Do I hear 3 times? Do I hear 4 times? Do I hear 5 times? And that was that guy. So he comes in, and he's this big, fat dude. And he just waddles in there. And he starts talking to this other Israeli guy. And he's sweating and kind of cracking all these kind of weird jokes and talking about gigs that he had in the last couple days, comedy gigs. And I kind of pieced together he was, I don't know, some type of comedian or something who was doing this to make money, And so so then finally people start to trickle in, coming in from the flyers that I handed out the day before. People start coming in for the auction, and it's a lot of Orthodox Jews. It's in an Orthodox Jewish section of Brooklyn. So these guys in black hats and beards, and some other people, kind of a different mix of people. And this auctioneer gets up and starts, talking, and he starts kind of telling what's going on and starting to make introductions before the Israeli guy starts to auction stuff off. But this big fat dude, I feel like he keeps like throwing in jokes from his comedy routine, you know, which are really raunchy, like totally disgusting, you know. And so it's like a room full of Orthodox Jews, and he keeps making jokes about dildos. I'm like, dude, I don't know if this is the best audience for your thing, you know. So he keeps saying it, and I'm like, okay, this is really weird. And the other guy, the auctioneer, gets up and he's like, starting to do the auction. He's like, okay, who will take this video camera? Do I hear, you know, we're starting the bidding at $200. Do I hear $200? No. $100? No. $100? I'm like, I'll take it. You know? I raise my hand, everyone's like, oh, okay. And so someone else is like, I'll take $200. He's like, okay, $200. Do I hear $300? $300? I'm like, 300. And like people are kind of looking at me. I'm like, yeah, all right, I'll take it. You know? So he's like, okay, good. You know. And then someone's like, all right. So I sell that, and then he's like, okay, let's move on to this refrigerator. Do I hear $1,000? $1,000 going once? Someone's like, 150, you know? They're like, okay, 150. Do I hear $2,000? People are like, you know, they're like, $2,000? I'm like, yeah, I'll take it. And I'm like, they're like, oh, okay, 250. And then it just keeps going, you know? And I don't know, he keeps putting his freaking pinky up, you know? And I'm starting to get like a little like skeezed out. Also because like I came in there, you know, this is like I'm really poor, as I was saying before, you know what I mean? And I mean part of it was maybe fashion, but also like I couldn't buy new jeans, but my jeans were totally like ripped like here and here. So like my legs are hanging out, you know, and I've got like a hat on and like and a sweatshirt. And like this keeps going on. He's like, who will be, and he was like selling, we're gonna sell 5 video cameras at $500 a piece. Do I hear going once, you know? And he's like, boo. I'm like, I'll take 7. And so we were like, what is up with this guy? And like right now it's been an hour and a half, and I've racked up like $10,000 worth of like washing machines and video cameras, you know, because he keeps putting his pinky up. Because sometimes he would even put up other people's signals, you know, like because everyone had different signals. Some people were like this, some people were like this. So what he would do is that until someone bid, he'd like put up someone else's symbol. So sometimes he'd be like this, you know, do I hear 200? And I'd like look over, and like I'd be like, that's your sign, dude. You know? And he wouldn't do it. He'd be like that. He'd be like, all right, $13,000 for that washing machine and that laptop, you know? And I don't know. So it just kept going on. And after about 3 hours, and it was just interspersed between this guy doing this and then this like big fat sweaty guy being like, sold, you know? So this broad walks into a bar, you know? Like, the guy who was running the auction would keep making jokes off of the side, like really raunchy, and the Orthodox Jews like being like not so kosher, you know. But anyway, after a point, people started asking me like, "What do you do?" You know, they're like, "Do you run a business?" I'm like, sorta. You know? And I'm getting nervous, and at one point, like after one point that he did this, after about like 2 hours, after I've bought like almost everything in the store and he's like selling more stuff, I realized how dishonest this is, because most of these people there are just trying to do something, like start a business, maybe resell these things, and I keep like messing them up by bidding on these things. And it kept striking me and then I had to start lying about what I did. They'd ask like, "What's your business?" I'm like, I've got a business and stuff, you know. And I start to get really nervous, and I start to get nauseous to my stomach because I keep lying. And so one time, you know, it's like I keep lying to people, and then he puts up his finger one more time for like, you know, a Casio a freaking keyboard, you know, and I'm like, I can't take this, and I just run out of the store. Like, I literally, like, hold my stomach and run out of the store, and I'm like, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't lie to people. And I tell myself I'm gonna come back at the end of the day, like a few hours later, and I'll be like, listen, I know I left, I worked for this many hours, you should give me this much money, I don't care, you know, I'm just not gonna do it, I had to leave, you know. I started to feel a little better, and I wait around for like 2.5 hours, and I walk back, and when I get there, I pull aside the guy who's making the raunchy jokes, because he's the guy who actually was paying the money, and he had been sweating the whole time. Like, he kept getting kind of like sweatier, like sweatier and sweatier, and he kept rubbing his nose, and he kept looking sicker and sicker, you know. And I pull him to the back, and at this point, when I come back, he's like totally profusely sweating. His armpits are sweating, like his like fat belly is sweating, and he's like, I don't feel so good, you know. Like, he just kept saying how sick he was, and I'm like, hey, I left 3 hours ago. I just couldn't do it. Just pay me, you know, whatever I worked for. He's like, how much do I owe you? How much do I owe you? And he takes out another wad of bills. Like, he takes out a wad of bills and he starts counting off this money. And I'm like, I told you, I left like 3 or 4 hours ago. So he's just like, yeah, whatever. And he just gives me the full amount that I'd be working for the day. And it was really weird. That's the end of the story. Is that I got paid for the full day's worth of work, but I left like halfway through the day because I was being so dishonest. So maybe it all came around, you know, karmically.
Karma.
Right?
Did you end up buying anything?
Right, yeah, I have a bunch of refrigerators in the back and a bunch of laptops.
But what would happen if you bid on something and nobody else did?
Well, the thing was is that, like, they would pretend that I was getting it. Do you know what I mean? So they'd be like, that would happen a lot. Like, so everyone thought that I had, like, an insane amount of refrigerators and washing machines, you know? Like, I kept bidding on these things, and
People wouldn't bid over you?
no, because every time what happened was I was used there to raise their bid. Do you see what I'm saying? So, like, people would be, like, bidding on this washing machine for $5,000, you know? Not even, they wouldn't even go that high, but, like, you know, like $2,000 or $3,000. And the guy would be like, you know, they'd be like, 3,000. He'd be like, do I hear 340? You know? And I'd be like, and they'd be like, that's too rich for my blood, you know? And then they would keep it. I don't know what they did with it. I don't know. I just, like, didn't understand what was going on, you know?
Wow.
So I think he got the money from the excess stuff or something like that, you know? Or it had another auction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah. It was really skeezy and slimy, you know?
You should be ashamed of yourself.
I am. That's why I ran out. Nauseous. People kept asking me. They're just like, what do? Do you want a store? You know? I was like, no.
You know, it's so
And I looked like a bum, you know? And it's like, do they really believe this? Like, how did they not notice that his pinky kept going up every single time? And, like, every time his pinky went up, like, the bid never got any higher, and I got the, like, you know? I don't know.
Shit.
But that happens, you know?
I can't, yeah. You never would think that. It's a good story.
Yeah. Oh, it's another one.